Hello and welcome to some Dodge family history. This is where I present information and research on my ancestors who served in the military during the early 20th century. Today, I will be presenting on the military service of Private David Nemetzky, Company B, 12th Infantry Regiment, as well as his service in the Hospital Corps in 1909. We will use records that are available on Family Search, such as unit and post returns, as well as National Archives records, such as special orders, bi-monthly muster rolls, and Adjutant General's office correspondence, to tell the story of this chapter of his military service. Following his honorable discharge on May 28, 1907, David Nemetzky requested permission to re-enlist in the Army. On May 31, 1907, the Army recruiter in Savannah, Georgia, telegraphed the War Department, stating that David Nemetzky desired to re-enlist and to be assigned to the infantry at Fort Porter. He was 5 foot 3.5 inches tall and 113 pounds, but otherwise qualified. The Adjutant General's office replied that David Nemetzky would be accepted for re-enlistment and for the recruiter to note the variations in height and weight. On June 3, 1907, he was re-enlisted at Fort Slocum, New York, and assigned to Company B, 12th Infantry Regiment, stationed at Fort Porter, New York, arriving there on June 19, 1907. Until my recent trip to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., not much was known about David Nemetzky's service in the infantry. According to the monthly returns for the 12th Infantry Regiment, Company B marched from Fort Porter to Fort Niagara, a distance of 29 miles, on July 1, 1907, and arrived there the next day for the annual target practice, and remained for the Atlantic competition, returning to Fort Porter on August 9th. They left Fort Porter again on August 14th for Fort Hughes, New York. While there, they participated in drill demonstrations and, according to the Buffalo News from August 22, 1907, demonstrated how battles are won. They also took part in the Canada Day Parade in Buffalo on September 4, 1907. The Buffalo Times from September 4, 1907 reported, "The gallant boys of the 12th were garbed in their familiar service uniforms of olive drab, with campaign hats and leggings to match their uniforms. They bore their rifles over their shoulders. The boys of the 12th appeared every inch warriors." They also took part in the dedication of the McKinley Monument at Buffalo on September 5th. According to the bi-monthly muster for Company B, 12th Infantry Regiment, for September and October of 1907, Private Nemetzky was on detached service at the target range at Fort Niagara, New York, from October 3rd to October 11th. As recorded in the bi-monthly muster for November and December 1907, he was on special duty in the company dining room beginning on December 10th. It was while on this special duty in the company mess that he would find a place that would fit him in his future service in the Army. On January 2, 1908, Special Order No. 1 was issued by the Department of the East. Paragraph 2 of this special order indicates that Private David Nemetzky was to report to Fort Riley, Kansas by January 13, 1908, to the Commandant Mounted Service School for admittance to the Training School for Bakers and Cooks, to enter upon the course of instruction with class of January 15, 1908, for instruction as cooks. The next paragraph of this order explains something that I have always wondered about. It reads, "Under authority contained in paragraph 111, General Orders No. 9, War Department, January 7, 1907, Private David Nemetzky, Company B, 12th Infantry, having less than 2 years and 6 months to serve before being detailed, will be discharged from his company for the convenience of the government, and re-enlisted on the date following that of discharge for the same organization." He was honorably discharged on January 4, 1908, and re-enlisted the next day, January 5th. At this time, he had been serving in his present enlistment for 7 months, meaning he had 2 years and 5 months remaining in his current enlistment. Until I had found this special order, I never understood why he had been discharged and re-enlisted in January of 1908. He left for Fort Riley, Kansas on January 7, 1908. On my trip to the National Archives, I was unable to find the bi-monthly musters for the School for Bakers and Cooks. However, the bi-monthly musters for Company B, 12th Infantry, show that he was at the School for Bakers and Cooks as a student until May 15, 1908, when he completed the assigned course of instruction. The Army and Navy Journal from May 23, 1908, reported on the Bakers and Cooks School at Fort Riley, Kansas, as follows. "A class of 22 were graduated last week from the Bakers and Cooks School at this post. Of this number, 14 were sent to different posts. The remainder belonged to organizations stationed at this post. Private Nemetzky remained on detached service at Fort Riley from May 16, 1908 until June 16, 1908, as an assistant instructor for the School of Bakers and Cooks. He returned to Fort Porter on June 25, 1908. Following his return to Fort Porter, Private Nemetzky received his first promotion in the Army and was promoted to the rank of cook on July 14, 1908. Following his promotion, he was sent back to Fort Niagara, New York, as a cook for the Atlantic Division Competitors' Mess from July 16 through July 31st. He remained at Fort Niagara from August 1st through August 20th, 1908, attached to Company A, 12th Infantry Regiment, to complete small arms practice. Even as a cook, he still had to know how to handle a weapon. On February 10, 1909, David Nemetzky wrote a letter to his congressman, Herbert Parsons, requesting a transfer to a unit remaining in the United States. The reason for this request is unknown. The only evidence of this request is the Adjutant General's Office Correspondence Index. The actual correspondence no longer exists. The 12th Infantry would be under orders to travel to the Philippine Islands. His request was granted, and Special Order 126 from the Eastern Department was issued on June 3, 1909, which reads, under paragraph 113, Army Regulations, Private David Nemetzky, Company B, 12th Infantry, Fort Porter, New York, is transferred to the 29th Infantry and will remain on duty at that post pending the arrival of the 29th Infantry, when he will be assigned to a company by the regimental commander. This transfer is effective just prior to the departure of Company B, 12th Infantry from Fort Porter for the Philippine Islands. However, this request and order would shortly prove to be unnecessary. On February 18, 1909, Special Order No. 40 from the East Department was issued and reads, under paragraph 1430, Army Regulations 1908, Private David Nemetzky, Company B, 12th Infantry, Fort Porter, New York, is transferred to the Hospital Corps. Upon receipt of this order at the post, the soldier will be directed to report to the surgeon for duty. Army Regulation 1430 from 1908 is the same as Army Regulation 1440 from his transfer to the Hospital Corps back in 1906 and reads, enlisted men may be transferred to the Hospital Corps as privates by the commander of a division, separate brigade, or department on the application of the surgeon of the post or command forwarded through military channels. The application will state the age, character, physical description, and habits of the soldier, date of expiration of current enlistment, and whether made for an existing or prospective vacancy. While referenced in the special orders, the applications for transfer to the Hospital Corps for Private Nemetzky, both from 1906 and 1909, no longer exist. His transfer back to the Hospital Corps took place on February 20th, 1909. He would remain at Fort Porter and in the United States, but as a member of the Hospital Corps. The special order approving his transfer from the 12th Infantry to the 29th Infantry was rescinded on June 14, 1909. David Nemetzky remained in the Hospital Corps for the remainder of his re-enlistment. While at Fort Porter, he was promoted to Private First Class on April 19, 1909, just his second promotion during his time in the Army. He served at Fort Porter until May 10, 1909, when he was assigned to Fort Wadsworth, New York. He was at Fort Wadsworth until June 26, 1909, when he was again transferred back to Fort Niagara on detached service with the Hospital Corps. The only available personal papers from the Hospital Corps for David Nemetzky indicate that he was in possession of his complete field equipment. While at Fort Niagara, he appears to have been attached to Company C of the Hospital Corps, which was headquartered at Fort Niagara. Company C of the Hospital Corps received the following general order dated June 22, 1909, from the Department of the East. All officers and enlisted men of this company will proceed from Fort Niagara, New York, to Toledo, Ohio, for the purpose of participating from July 2 to 11, 1909, in a military tournament to be held at that place. Upon completion of duty at Toledo, the company will proceed to Antietam, Maryland, for duty at a camp of instruction for militia medical officers, to be held at that place July 15 to August 15, 1909. Upon completion of duty at Antietam, the company will proceed to Camp Perry, Ohio, arriving at that place no later than August 19, 1909, for duty during the national matches to be held at that place. Upon completion of the national matches, the company will return to Fort Niagara. The Army and Navy Journal from July 10, 1909 reports, one of the most important military tournaments ever held in the United States was opened at Bayview Park, Toledo, Ohio on July 5th to continue through July 10th. Its chief purpose was not to amuse the people, but to educate them in the aims and purposes of the Army. Beginning on Monday, July 5th, 2 performances have been given daily at 2:30 and 7 p.m., each lasting 2 hours. The admission charge was 50 cents. The program consisted of exhibition drills by the infantry, cavalry, Field Artillery, Engineer Corps, and Signal Corps. The machine gun platoon of each regiment gave exhibitions of going into action, firing their machine guns, repacking the gun on the mules, and going off the field. Throughout the drills, the Hospital Corps demonstrated that branch of Army work, supposedly dead and wounded men being cared for on the spot. The July 24th edition of the Army and Navy Journal states, "Some conception of the popular interest in the tournament may be formed from a consideration of the attendance. On Thursday, July 8th, 21,000 people flocked to the camp and arena, of whom 14,000 were at the afternoon show. The camp was thrown open for the public inspection each morning until the noon hour. Then the grounds were cleared in preparation for the afternoon exercises. The visitors were thus enabled to see all the varying phases of camp routine. Such bringing of the Army and the public in close touch is a thing of importance. No spectator could fail to return to his home, carrying with him better and more intelligent ideas of what it means to be a soldier in a Republic's scheme of national defense." According to the bi-monthly muster roll for July and August of 1909 for the Hospital Corps, Fort Wadsworth, New York, while on detached service, Private First Class David Nemetzky was AWOL from August 7 to August 10, 1909. The circumstances of his going AWOL are unknown, as no record has been located other than the bi-monthly muster roll. He appears to have been tried by summary court-martial following his return from going AWOL. Summary courts-martial are usually held to resolve minor offenses and misconduct of enlisted personnel. The person accused must give consent for a summary court-martial, which it appears he did. The summary court-martial was approved on August 12, 1909, and his punishment was a forfeiture of $5 and a character rating of very good. He completed his detached service on August 19, 1909, and returned to Fort Wadsworth, New York. On August 28, 1909, he was assigned to Fort Howard, Maryland, arriving there the next day, August 29th. It is here at Fort Howard, Maryland, that Private First Class David Nemetzky finished his enlistment. On September 6, 1909, he requested discharge from the Army by purchase. During the first half of the 20th century, an enlisted soldier could pay his way out of his enlistment. From the Adjutant General's office correspondence housed at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., he explained that with the cooperation of my brother Jacob Nemetzky, we will start business about October 1, 1909, as manufacturers of shirts. Also that my father and mother, who are getting old and feeble, are dependent upon us for support. So by being granted my discharge, I can materially help my parents and family, and also better myself in time. His request for discharge by purchase was accompanied by 3 letters. One from his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Herman Nemetzky, one from Morris Bernstein, a shirt manufacturer, and one from a Mr. M. Lubert, a suit and skirt manufacturer. His request for discharge by purchase was approved on September 18, 1909, and Special Order 219 from the War Department was issued on September 21st, which reads, "Private First Class David Nemetzky, Hospital Corps, Fort Howard, Maryland, will be discharged from the Army by the commanding officer of that post by purchase, under the provisions of General Orders No. 13, War Department, January 25, 1909. He was honorably discharged on September 25, 1909. The purchase price for his discharge was $80, which was the price a soldier would pay for a discharge following 5 years of military service. It appears, however, that the shirt manufacturing business was short-lived, as he re-enlisted in March of 1911. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and found it informative. My recent trip to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and finding the bi-monthly musters and special orders uncovered many details of his service in Company B, 12th Infantry Regiment, as well as details surrounding his transfer to and service in the Hospital Corps in 1909. The Adjutant General's office correspondence that is still available at the National Archives gives color and context to his discharge by purchase in 1909. In addition, the weekly periodical Army and Navy Journal found on Internet Archive also provides additional clues to his military service. The next presentation will look at his next re-enlistment period and service in the Hospital Corps from 1911 to 1914. Thank you.